Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska, and this is the news. During a speech in the Polish parliament, the head of the Ukrainian parliament's council, Ruslan Stefańczuk, declared joint actions to commemorate the victims of the Volhynia massacre. According to Minister Marcin Przydacz, the attitude of Ukrainian leaders shows a change of attitude towards the crime of genocide of the entire Ukrainian political class. Presidential Minister Marcin Przydacz believes that the Ukrainian political class is taking an increasingly responsible approach to the issue of the Volhynia genocide. The support shown to Ukraine by Poland after the 24th of February 2022 has opened a new chapter in Polish-Ukrainian relations. In the first months, we saw regular Ukrainians going to clean Polish cemeteries. On the other hand, President Zelensky was at the Orlon cemetery, along with President Duda, so certain gestures were made. Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Ruslan Stefańczuk, speaking about the genocide in Volhynia, expressed his condolences to the families and ancestors of the victims. To all the families and descendants of the victims of the events of that time in Volhynia, I express my sincere sympathy and gratitude for maintaining the enlightened memory of their ancestors. Ruslan Stefańczuk also addressed the issue of exhuming the victims of the crime. Together we will search for and restore memorial sites. Together we will bring back from oblivion those who rest in nameless graves, both in Ukraine and Poland. This is an important declaration, as it indicates that Ukraine wants an explanation and dignified commemoration of the victims of the Volhynia massacre, points out the senior speaker of the parliament, Antoni Macierewicz. This is hopefully a statement of position and an announcement of action, because this was genocide, and there must be consequences towards the organization and towards those who are guilty of giving such orders. A thorough explanation, investigation, and commemoration of the victims will close a difficult page in Polish-Ukrainian relations. Without this, reconciliation between the two nations is impossible, even though more than 80 years have passed since the crime. They have been an element poisoning mutual relations, and their approach to this matter will absolutely have to be dealt with. I think we can perceive this declaration as a clear signal that there is political and moral readiness on the Ukrainian side to take up these issues. In the face of Russian aggression against Ukraine, both Warsaw and Kiev recognize the need to arrange relations on historical issues. Building divisions between Ukrainians and Poles only works to the advantage of the Russian Federation. What happened is here to stay, so it seems to me that we need to apologize for it and look to the future. The topic of genocide has recently returned to public debate in connection with the 80th anniversary of the so-called Bloody Sunday, which falls on July 11th. Between July 11th and July 12, 1943, the Ukrainian insurgent army launched a coordinated attack on Polish residents of 150 villages in Volhynia. Both nations should learn a lesson. No ideology is more important than human life. Not only should the perpetrators be judged of course only in absentia, morally, but also the ideology they followed. On July 22, 2016, the Polish Sejm established July 11th as the National Day of Remembrance for the victims of genocide perpetrated by Ukrainian nationalists on the citizens of the Second Republic of Poland. An agreement regulating the conditions for storing tactical nuclear weapons on Belarusian territory was signed in the Kremlin yesterday. However, decisions on their possible use will remain with Russia. This is the latest example of the irresponsible behavior Russia has displayed since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, Washington comments. Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty commits 189 countries, including Russia and Belarus. According to experts, recent decisions taken in the Kremlin are meant to intimidate nuclear annihilation and thus discourage Kiev's political allies from supporting the fight in Ukraine. We warned our partners in the West about this, that it was going to happen, and we still talked about it more than a year ago, and at that time we proposed to develop a strategy to respond to Lukashenko and Putin, who want to place nuclear tactical weapons on Belarusian territory. Unfortunately, our voices were too weak in a situation where the Ukrainian army is close to liberating its territory, or, for example, is close to liberating Crimea. Tactical nuclear weapons may be used in this situation. If indeed we are going to see this kind of move on Moscow's part, because for the time being there is talk, firstly of preparing the infrastructure, and secondly of Ministers Shoigu and Krenin signing an agreement that sets out the rules for the stationing or use of these warheads by the Russian side in Belarus. Moscow, in agreement with Minsk, is bringing in illegal immigrants and sending them to the Belarus-Poland border to attempt to invade the European Union. Yesterday, we revealed 90 attempts to illegally enter Poland from Belarus. Included in this number, which we report daily, are also those incidents when foreigners approach the barrier but are unable to cross it, and our patrols are on the other side. Immigrants try to attack Polish patrols. Most often this happens when they fail to cross the border, they see our patrols, and at that moment they start throwing either stones or branches at them. These actions fall within the scope of hybrid warfare, which involves the interaction of conventional methods, disinformation attempts, and terrorist, as well as cyber attacks. In recent months, Poland has also been the target of powerful cyber attacks, which have been carried out mainly from across our eastern border. Since the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, their intensity has increased significantly. It is our collective responsibility to spare no effort to accurately attribute all these attacks and bring justice to the cyber criminals. Meanwhile, the Russian Volunteer Corps has announced that it has re-entered the Belgorod region of Russia. The corps consists of dissidents fighting on the side of Kiev. Their goal is to force the Russians to redeploy their forces, weakening the front line. In most cases, there is simply a misinterpretation of the information that the Russian Corps itself publishes, because the Corps, with some delay at this point, publishes photos, materials from this Monday's action, which is simply misread by most analysts and commentators. Moreover, the Russian Corps itself is deliberately trying to mislead the Russians in this way so that they will have to commit even more of their own forces to securing the border. After 5 months of fierce fighting for Bakhmut, Wagner's group took control of the city. Its founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, announced that the Wagnerians will leave the city by the 1st of June. The mercenaries are to be replaced by regular Russian army troops. The capture of Bakhmut was paid for with the blood of the Wagnerians. Data speaks of 20 or even 40,000 dead. Although the front line at Bakhmut has shifted slightly to the west, Russia has been unable to claim any significant operational success for months. Kiev, on the other hand, is announcing a counterattack. Ukraine's air defense system will soon be reinforced by modern F-16 fighter jets. Air Force spokesman Colonel Yuri Ichnat confirms that dozens of such aircraft will be delivered to Ukraine hangars. The race to be the next Secretary General of NATO is heating up. But it is a race run largely in the dark, with no sign of a winner yet. Jens Stoltenberg, the Transatlantic Military Alliance's Norwegian Secretary General, is due to step down at the end of September after 9 years in post. Many alliance members would like his succession settled at or even before a NATO summit in Lithuania in mid-July. That does not give NATO's 31 nations, spanning from the United States through a new member Finland to Turkey, much time to forge the consensus needed to pick a new leader. They could also ask Stoltenberg to extend his term for a 4th time. Whoever takes the reins will do so at a critical time, facing the twin challenges of keeping allies together and supporting Ukraine while guarding against any escalation that would draw NATO directly into a war with Russia. One person well placed to judge what is at stake is the alliance's former head, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who said at a news conference this month that allies should not rush into a decision.
In the future, the new Secretary General of NATO should fulfill 2 requirements. Firstly, be able to keep the unity within the alliance, and secondly, be able to speak tough language to Putin and other autocrats that are threatening the alliance. On the latter, well, I'm not that concerned because we know that in such situations it is possible to take decisions in a very last moment. But my view is it's more important to find the right person that fulfills the 2 criteria I mentioned than to take a premature decision. And this is also the reason why I asked Stoltenberg if he would consider positively to continue 1 year more if he's asked to do so. Well, of course, he wouldn't answer. I didn't expect that.
British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace declared last week that he would like the job. But as some governments push for a first female NATO Secretary General, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is also emerging as a serious contender. Jamie Shea, a former senior NATO official who served with the alliance for 38 years, said he thought it likely the alliance would pick a current leader for their context book and ability to pick up the phone to their peers.
So there are a series of meetings held privately at NATO headquarters by the Dean. And eventually a consensus is reached on a candidate who has the best chance of achieving the agreement of all of the 31 allies. So that's the way it goes. And rather like in the Vatican, where the new Pope has been chosen, there's no white smoke coming out of a chimney at NATO headquarters, but then the name is announced. And normally a NATO summit, which has been the case in recent times, then publicly approves and announces the candidate, and the transition process begins.
Many diplomats see Wallace as a long shot for the job. Although he is widely respected across the alliance, the desire to pick a woman counts against him with some members, and some, notably France, want someone from a European Union country, hoping for closer cooperation between NATO and the EU. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen meets all of the above criteria. Although she says she is not a candidate, she has stopped short of saying she is not interested in the job. NATO diplomats say that behind the scenes, she is being seriously considered. If Frederiksen got the job, she would be the third NATO boss in a row from a Nordic country. "I'm not applying for any job postings," she told reporters in Copenhagen on Wednesday, May 24th, playing down speculation that her visit to the US in early June might amount to a job interview for the NATO role. While the post traditionally goes to a European, any serious candidate needs buy-in from Washington, NATO's dominant power. A source familiar with US thinking said the Biden administration does not yet have a favored candidate, and a lively debate among top aides was ongoing. A State Department spokesperson said it was too early in the process to speculate on who the United States will support. Some allies also argue the job should go to an Eastern European for the first time, particularly as Russia's war in Ukraine has made that region even more important for NATO. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen of Germany, and Canadian Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland have also featured in discussions among diplomats and media reports. But diplomats say Kallas is seen as too hawkish on Russia for some NATO members. Berlin wants von der Leyen to stay at the Commission, and Freeland faces major headwinds as a non-European from a country considered a laggard on defense spending. The apparent shortage of candidates with widespread support raises the possibility of Stoltenberg's tenure being extended again, perhaps until another NATO summit in 2024. Speaking to Reuters at an interview in February, Jens Stoltenberg would not speculate on his future and insisted his term was up in the fall.
But again, as I have stated what I have to say about this. I made it clear that my term ends at the end also in this fall. I have nothing more to say, and if I start to go into this discussion, it just becomes very complicated. So I think my message is that it's really what matters now is to be focused on the task.
Though a very public role, the contest is extremely opaque, played out mainly in consultations among leaders and diplomats. Those consultations continue until all NATO members agree they have reached a consensus. Earlier today, German, Dutch, Portuguese, and Spanish ships arrived at Poland's port of Gdynia to join the Polish vessels stationed there as part of NATO's Standing Maritime Group 1. The group serves as a rapid multinational response force and comprises vessels from NATO member countries. The command of the group rotates among the participating nations, with Germany currently holding the command. This visit took place in the context of intensified NATO activities in the North and Baltic Seas, amidst the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, have a wonderful weekend.